All right, well, welcome everybody to our final colloquium of the fall 2022 semester. For those of you who I don't know, which is I think everybody in this room, or I know everybody in this room. Those of you who are joining us via Zoom who I don't know, my name is Karen Ross. I am the Director of the Graduate Programs in Conflict Resolution, and I'm really happy to welcome you all here tonight for our David Matz Fellows report. So those of you who are not familiar with the David Matz Fellowship, this is a fellowship that was created in 2017, I think, in honor of the founder of our program, David Matz. And it is a fellowship that provides our students with an opportunity to engage in experiential learning of all kinds, mostly during the summer. And tonight, our 6 fellows from this past year will be speaking about what they did, what they learned, and I guess I'm not sure exactly what else, but I'm looking forward to hearing from it. So please join me in welcoming Olga Skaredina, Meity Kubuan, Jillian Miller, Iman Azganovic, Katherine Manning, and Hayley Bartlett to speak about their experiences as David Matz Fellows. And if you are here and haven't, please remember to sign in for colloquium credit.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name's Hayley Bartlett, and I'm going to be talking about the opportunity I had this summer to study abroad in Northern Ireland. Really quickly, I'm just going to cover where I studied, what I saw, some of what I learned, and some of the career impacts. And then obviously just a really quick thank you for everything I'm going to share that I was able to see and learn. So I will start with an incredibly brief, way too much of an oversight of Ireland versus Northern Ireland. If anybody is interested in the topic, I definitely encourage you. I have some resources at the end that we used in preparing to travel, as well as I am very happy to talk about the experience at all times if anybody wants to talk about it more. But basically, Northern Ireland is a collection of 6 counties. What happened was there was a partition between the Republic of Ireland and what is now called Northern Ireland. They're 2 separate countries. Northern Ireland was the largest landmass, which was still in the majority of favoring British rule. So the 2 areas were separated, and it's now Ireland and Northern Ireland. I studied in Northern Ireland, and specifically, we were studying the history of the Troubles, which began around the 1960s with a civil rights movement, a lot of which mirrored the civil rights movement here in the United States. And some of the height of the conflict occurred in the 1970s, a lot of violence, a lot of death. And then the height of the violent conflict ended after a series of ceasefires from 1994 to 1998. And then a multi-party talk was initiated, known as the Good Friday Agreement. So again, this is very brief overview, but I want to spend more time getting into what specifically we saw and we learned about. But if you're interested in more about the history, very happy to share more. So the first aspect of the studying abroad that I want to talk about are these bonfires, because I truly think that they are one aspect of the culture there that really just shifted the way that I view conflict, the way that I view culture, cultural celebrations. These bonfires are part of a July 12th celebration for the Loyalists. They celebrate the Battle of Boyne, which happened in 1690, where the Protestant King William III won victory over Catholic King James II. So on the 12th of July, they have parades, they have marches. It's a big celebration for the Loyalist community. And on the eve of that celebration, they do these bonfires. These bonfires can consist of burning flags, effigies, political posters. So they've definitely been a point of contention and have furthered some of the underlying conflict that very much still exists there today. As you can see, this is an incredible fire and was actually one of the smaller ones in the area. You can see that it's wood that actually is just piled up by people in the community. There's not really a scaffolding to how they create it. So there's a lot of community building that goes into this process. And you can see a little bit in that middle picture that we've actually got children who are playing around the fire and around the bonfire. So it's definitely seen as a celebration within the community, despite that connection. We did witness a Ireland Republic flag being burned within this bonfire. So that just shows you some of that conflict that's still very much present today. So then we saw quite a few murals. I definitely did not have space to share all of the murals we saw. They are a prominent way of sharing the history of what happened in Northern Ireland, because a lot of the history of Northern Ireland, it is a history of narratives, and it's about people sharing their experiences and their involvement. And so these murals are a really great way of sharing that history as the individuals creating the murals see it. So all the way on the left-hand side, you can see the Ulster Volunteer Force, which was a loyalist paramilitary group. What it says there is, we seek nothing but the elementary right implanted in every man, the right, if you are attacked, to defend yourself. So I think this mural is really powerful at suggesting the level of violence which occurred throughout the Troubles. And you can see they've got masks on, they've got the guns, so definitely these violent images are something that we saw quite a bit of. In the middle there, you can see an image of what was known as Bloody Sunday, which occurred January 30th, 1972. So it was when British soldiers shot 26 civilians who were participating in a march against internment without trial. 14 individuals did pass away as a result of that violent conflict. And as you can see, right there in the middle is Catholic priest Edward Daly, who was waving a white cloth as he was trying to help the wounded Jackie Duddy out of the situation. Unfortunately, Jackie Duddy was one of the individuals who passed away, but this is a really powerful image of trying to escape that violence and still being engulfed in it. And then all the way on the right-hand side, that's an image of Bobby Sands. He was a member of the Provisional IRA who was arrested after helping plan some bombings. He went on a hunger strike while he was in prison and actually died as a result of that hunger strike, trying to earn rights for political prisoners. So then I want to finish off what I saw with peace walls, because I think these, again, had a really profound impact on my understanding of violence and peace building and what we label as peace. So these peace walls are between the differing segregated communities. And so basically, you can see in the middle there, it's actually a gate that fully shuts so that you don't have a lot of movement between the two communities after dark. So you can see that there's a physical manifestation of the divide in the society with these peace walls, which I just think is so profound in the fact that they're called peace walls, despite the role that they're actually playing in the conflict, is so intriguing. And you can see on the right-hand side, one of the peace walls, it's just a place where a lot of individuals who are coming to see the area in Belfast write little notes and make little comments, the date they were there, things like that. This picture that I have, it states, "I lived with the Berlin Wall for 5 years and helped bring it down. May the same happen with this wall," which I just thought was such an incredible quote to have found among a large wall full of many quotes, and just kind of shows some of the cross-cultural connections. And an individual who had lived with the Berlin Wall and seen it fall, coming here and kind of seeing these peace walls and the role that they were playing, I just thought was really interesting and really incredible for me to be able to see. So some of what I learned, I definitely could not fit it in the time I have here with you all today. But the role of generational trauma and collective memories, a lot of the learning we did in Northern Ireland was focused on personal narratives, panels, hearing from the individuals involved or whose parents were involved, whose families were changed forever by engagement with this conflict. And so the role that it does have years after the violent conflict has largely come to an end, there's still so much of the society that is based around that conflict and the trauma that still exists even within the generations that were born after the height of the conflict. And then the power of grassroots peace building, as well as of cross-cultural dialogues, was just a theme time and time again. As we were listening to some of these individuals who are responsible for grassroots peace building within such a divided society, it was really incredible to see the work that they've done. And we met a youth center in Belfast where they're really making incredible strides to having communities that have been torn by violence come together and be able to coexist and even become friends, as well as these cross-cultural dialogues of discussing what happened and what the impact is, what you learned growing up, and what you feel despite what your parents might feel about the conflict. So it was really some incredible things that I was able to learn firsthand from these individuals. In terms of the impact it had on future career plans, I will repeat myself that I just simply could not fit it in the time I have here with you all. But I plan to work in nonprofit, and I have hopes to engage in community mobilization and grassroots peace building. So to be able to see individuals in a society that, again, is just so revolving around this conflict, who are still able to find ways to engage in this grassroots peace building and to continue these conversations despite the difficulties they may have faced and continue to face, I think was really incredible. And some of what I've learned, I hope to take forth into the work I do. Cross-cultural communication. We had an incredible time speaking. We had the opportunity to speak with so many interesting people who were directly involved in the conflict and the efforts of peace building afterwards. So the ability to talk with these individuals, to ask them questions, to hear their narratives was just really incredible. And I hope to continue these cross-cultural communications in everything I do, because I learned a great deal from everybody I was able to speak with. And new networks. I just have a lot of love for everybody who was involved in the planning process, who traveled with me, the individuals over in Northern Ireland who helped make this possible on the ground. So I definitely have a lot of new networks to, tap into, which I just think is another incredible aspect of being able to travel like this and be go all day. You definitely make some friends that way. So then I just want to say a giant thank you to everybody who made the trip possible, the generous support of the David Matz Fellowship. Without this funding, I never would have been able to engage in this opportunity. And it's definitely solidified my desire to work in community engagement. And I will take what I learned with me into everything I do. So thank you to everybody who made that a possibility for me. And then I just have some resources if anybody is interested in learning more. Again, I have not stopped talking about it since I came back over the summer. So if you're interested in hearing more, I know that my family and friends probably aren't anymore. So definitely feel free to let me know. And I would be more than happy to share some of the resources I have and some of the experiences I've had. Thank you very much.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Katherine Manning. I too joined Hayley over the summer on the summer program to Northern Ireland. And there are a couple key reasons why I went on this program. First off, I knew I wanted to partake in the master's seminar class, and I understood that the topic for the year was going to be the Northern Ireland conflict. And I've always heard stories of the Northern Ireland conflict. However, I've never actually dug into doing the real research needed to fully understand what went wrong and what went right, I guess, in a weird way. So that's the reason why I decided to go for the summer program. And when I went to Northern Ireland, I really was focused on understanding, is this conflict about religion or is this conflict about identity? And I definitely uncovered a lot from that. And what sparked my interest while over there was intergenerational conflict. So to understand how conflict has been passed down by generations. And it actually led me to what I'm currently writing my master seminar paper on, which I'm one paragraph away from finishing. I actually am examining 3 eras of the conflict to understand how the narratives have shifted. As Hayley mentioned, narratives did play a major part in this conflict. And then the final reason why was because it gave me the opportunity to travel. Who wouldn't want to escape for a summer program in Ireland, Northern Ireland? And then when I actually was in Northern Ireland, there's a couple things that I really impacted my learning. First was getting a firsthand experience with what happened during this conflict and what has continued to happen. It was something that I stand by that you can't learn from reading the books or reading any articles or watching any movies. So that was extremely amazing to be on the ground there. And then another huge thing that I had no idea about was that segregation is still an everyday life in Northern Ireland, and everyone is okay with it. The communities are mostly segregated, the school system is mostly segregated, and it's working for them, which confuses me, but that's it. I'm not from there, so I don't have a say. And then also I understood more about the impact Northern Ireland had with Brexit, which again, when Brexit was happening, I had no idea what that actually would cause Northern Ireland to face with the Republic of Ireland. And then lastly, what I ultimately learned that the conflict wasn't about religion, it was strictly about identification. So while we were in Northern Ireland, we got to go to a lot of very interesting, cool places. We started in Derry, Londonderry, depending if you identify as Irish or Protestant, or Catholic or Protestant. And we visited sites like Armagh, Dumfries, and Belfast. And then after that, I actually went up to the north, where Giant's Causeway was, and a town called Portrush. And my goal with that was, yes, to see the sites, but also to understand what complete strangers thought of the conflict. So I actually was able to talk to a lot of people on train rides while going up there to get their narrative and their side and how they currently view the conflict, just to kind of get a firsthand experience of like, how are they passing that down to either their children or their grandchildren or a random stranger from America. And then I went to the Republic of Ireland, and to be completely honest, it was like a breath of fresh air. There wasn't conflict. Everyone got along from what I saw. So it was very, very interesting seeing Northern Ireland compared to the Republic of Ireland, and honestly, just comparing them. And then there were so many key people that I met during this summer program. We met Apprentice Boys leaders, the Orange Order, even the descendant of the founder of the Orange Order, former UVF, British Army, and IRA members. And then, as Hayley mentioned, on the 12th of July, there's the bonfires and bands. And we actually met like committee members of those events. And the most impactful was hearing stories of victims of the Troubles. So either if they were impacted by what happened, or if they lost any family members or friends or community members, just understanding how they share their story also was very interesting. And then these are a couple of my favorite pictures. The group that I went on this summer program with was incredible. I obviously went with Hayley and the amazing Kelly Ward as well. And there's some pictures of the bands that were marched throughout Derry, Londonderry, the Peace Walls in Belfast, Hayley and I learning some dances on the 12th of July. That was a sight to see. And then the campus where we actually studied at. Well, not in that building, but right next to that building. So, yeah. And that is all very similar to Hayley. I could not have done this without the David Matz Fellowship. So I am eternally grateful that I was able to be one of the fellows. So thank you.
So my name is Jillian Miller, and I'm going to share about, I did an internship this summer with Parque Ecopaths, which is an organization in Monteverde, Costa Rica. And I also just want to say how grateful I am. I also wouldn't have had this opportunity without the support of the fellowship. So I want to share about that. So why Monteverde, Costa Rica? So first and foremost, I have this personal connection with Monteverde. I studied abroad there as an undergrad and still maintain contact with my host family and some different friends in the area. I've been back to visit several times. So I was really excited to go back and just engage in this kind of deeper way. I was also interested in Costa Rica as its position as a leader in both sustainability and peace. It's made these very kind of ambitious carbon pledges. It abolished the military and is the location of the United Nations University for Peace. So it has kind of both of those things. And then in that vein, investigating the relationship between conflict resolution and sustainability. So I thought it was kind of a nice place to marry both of those topics. And then Monteverde itself has this very unique history. It's home to a large Quaker population that moved there in the 1950s, escaping the draft. Quakers advocate for nonviolence. So Monteverde in particular has this extra emphasis of nonviolence and kind of some interesting dynamics we'll talk a little bit more about next. So Monteverde's conflicts, when I approached my friend who's the director of the organization, the first thing he said was, oh, Monteverde has many beautiful conflicts. And I love that. And I think it's a lot of what we get at in this program. And that conflict is not something inherently bad, but it's this opportunity to kind of evaluate where you've been, where you're going. And I think that's a lot of where my work was with the organization this summer. So some of Monteverde's conflicts, this balance of growth versus sustainability. Monteverde is home to Cloud Forest. It's a huge ecotourism hub in Costa Rica. So it's just kind of exploded with growth. So how to balance that growth with sustainability. And one story that really stuck with me was this idea of like performative environmentalism. One of the organizations would do like a tree planting. So a group of tourists would come, plant a tree, and then they would take the tree out of the ground for the next group to come and plant. So it was very kind of like this Disneyfying of sustainability and conservation. And another conflict, the need of local versus the need of tourists. It's a small area, limited resources. So how do we balance all of these hotels and restaurants? Like it's all very geared at tourists with the needs of locals. So for example, there are really like no open public spaces. The only park that exists is Parque Ecopaz. Even the soccer field has been kind of closed off for teams. So it's really the needs of the locals are going unmet in favor of the needs of tourists. Again, kind of the nonprofit versus for-profit, speaking to that too. There's limited amount of space and resources and who is getting those. Economic interest versus social interest. So with that being said, like all of my connections there work in the tourist industry, whether in restaurants or tour companies. So it is this kind of very needed element, but then there's other needs, again, no public spaces. So there's some issues with like the youth not having places to go and substance abuse. There's issues with machismo and women not really having safe spaces like in the community to go. So how to meet the real economic needs and also addressing these social needs. And then this up the hill and down the hill, again, speaking to the kind of Quaker population, there's a large population of like North Americans. There's a Quaker Friends School. So people will come from the US for a year or so with their kids. And I think there's kind of a feel sometimes that up the hill, these kind of North Americans are getting more resources, more share, and down the hill, the locals, the Costa Rican, many generations been in Monteverde or Santa Elena, Monteverde are being neglected. So Parque Ecopaz kind of emerged as a solution to some of those needs. So it's funded by the owner and some grants and that sort of thing, but it's just a open community space. There's a soccer field, different nature programs. And so meeting these kind of three needs, the social well-being, addressing environmental education, and it's all based in these principles of permaculture. So it's very the whole picture kind of sustainability in terms of industries, economics, education, health and wellness, that whole picture approach. So one of the first things, the park had been closed from COVID and the director has just been kind of paying for it out of pocket. And you can see when I got there, this is kind of the situation. I was standing in grass like up to my hips. So that was one of the first things we did, is just kind of taking back over the space. You can see we were able to invite some volunteer groups. So they were kids from some of the US and a scout troop that were working with volunteers. So they were able to help do some of the cleanup and work with us there. And then also I think COVID also, like, again, this is a community that's fully driven by tourism. It was this kind of social economic recovery as well, that people had been really hard hit, and this kind of chance to reevaluate, like, is there a way to kind of diversify how people are making money? just because of how vulnerable people are when something like a pandemic happens and all sources of income are kind of stopped immediately. So that was also kind of in the director's mind as we're approaching this project. So for me, it was a really good opportunity to put all of kind of the theoretical things I'd learned into practice. So for example, last spring, I took collaborative governance and cross-cultural conflict, and I really used a lot of those tools in approaching this. So one of the first things I did was kind of look in the community at all the different stakeholders, those are doing similar things, those who might kind of be in opposition. Again, we have these limited resources, who Parquet EcoPass was already working with, who there was potential to work with, and kind of mapping out all of that collaboration. There are some kind of strained relationships. And so it's funny, when I was an undergrad, I actually studied at Instituto Monteverde, and the director of the park has some like very strong feelings. So that was somewhere we kind of like butted heads about, because I believed it was a potential for collaboration. So so just kind of seeing the whole picture and where there are places we could strengthen or change partnerships. So that leads me to some of the potential challenges that I identified and worked with while I was there. So one was this idea of leadership. It's the park right now is headed by this very kind of charismatic leader, but it's one person who can only do so much. So how do we branch out? So there's more local, there's lots of people in the community who want to be involved, but allowing them to step up and take on one of those roles to make the whole project more sustainable. The collaboration versus competition in the area. There's like grants and things, and who's getting that money and how can we work together? We all have similar goals instead of all doing the same things. This variety of goals and interests. So this kind of nonprofit park is not as lucrative as some of the other projects going on, and everyone in the community has different loyalties. And same with power. So some of it was like meeting with people in local government and that sort of things, and who's friends with who. So it was kind of mapping all that and seeing how to work with that. And then funding was a big one too. As I said, the director has been really supporting this out of his own pocket. So one of the big things that I did too is mapping out different ways of funding. So working on how we can kind of up the donation. Right now, this is kind of the donation system. So how to make it more accessible when people leave the park, they continue to support. We met with some different local businesses to work with them. So one of our goals is to open in this little building like a coffee shop tapas. And so working with other businesses to collaborate, a massage therapist to local massage therapist who wants to work in the park, and then really building the programming. So school break trips, internships, professional development. And so that was some of what I did too, was kind of develop this programming, and we were able to host several groups. That was a lot of fun. And then finally, just kind of imagining the future of EcoPass. And so this is kind of the dream of the founders, this Universidad de EcoPass. And there are no universities in Monteverde. Most of the youth that I know, like my host family, none of them have finished college. So his dream is this free for all locals university with opportunities for others to come too. So kind of taking that idea of permaculture and how does that look like in like this actual programming that's addressing the whole picture and the variety of conflicts in Monteverde. Yeah, and again, thank you so much. I had a really great summer, and it was nice to be able to go back and invest more in this community. That's touched me deeply. So thank you so much.
So hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here and share my experience as a David Matz Fellow. So my name is Olga Skaredina. I'm a former PhD student in global governance and human security, and now I pursue PhD in public policy at Northeastern University. So this summer, with the help of David Matz Fellowship, I attended Bonn Climate Change Conference that lasted for 2 weeks to observe intergovernmental process within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and simply put, UNFCCC, and to observe how young people engage in official negotiations. And the question is, why did I decide to go to the conference in the first place? So as a PhD student, my research interests revolve around the United Nations and how it interacts with the civil society through certain stakeholder engagement mechanisms. And so I specifically look into UNFCCC and United Nations Environment Program because they both have similar institutional arrangements. And that is why attending this conference for the first time was a very crucial step for me to understand how the UN space works, and how UN engages with civil society and especially young people. And now a little bit of a context and my research puzzle. So the 1972 Stockholm Conference was the first turning point for non-state actors' engagement in the UN system. It was the first ever environmental conference where non-state actors were invited to present their ideas and to voice their concerns. And it was the first conference that gathered an exceptional number of non-governmental organizations at that time. And then in 1992, there was the UN Conference on Environment and Development. And the outcome document was Agenda 21. And this document divides non-state actors into 9 major groups or 9 constituencies and encourages member states and international organizations to draw upon the expertise of non-state actors towards policy and program design, implementation, and evaluation. And UNFCCC, as a leading UN entity on climate change, acknowledges the increasing role of non-state actors and also provides engagement mechanisms for their inclusiveness in the system. And each year, if you follow climate change negotiations, you can notice that the number of non-governmental organizations involved in the processes, they are increasing, as well as the range of conducted side events, registered participants, raised concerns, and proposed solutions. And on this slide, you can see how UNFCCC divides non-governmental organizations into 9 major constituencies. However, despite a range of engagement opportunities, and I will elaborate on them a bit later, there are existing institutional arrangements that do not result in inclusiveness, but instead there is unequal power dynamics. And that is why, while being at that conference, my goal was to see how this power balance works and if it's there or not. And so the first question was, how do young people participate in the space? And so before, I actually wrote a paper for the class on conflict resolution on power asymmetry in UNFCCC and youth engagement. So I used that as a theoretical basement, as a theoretical foundation for my ethnographic observation at the UNFCCC conference. And so what did I learn from the theory? From the theory is that young people that engage in the UNFCCC conferences, they are mostly volunteers. And they struggle to fund their repeat attendance of the conferences because it's kind of expensive to travel all the world around. So, for example, this year, climate change conference was in Egypt. Next year, it would be in Dubai, and the year after, it probably will be in Australia. So you can imagine how expensive it is to fund your trip there, and especially accommodation. And so because of this, there is high turnover, and high turnover of young people makes it difficult for them to hold governments and other constituencies accountable to their promises. And it's also difficult for young people themselves to keep themselves accountable to what they promise all the time. And additionally, according to the United Nations, young people are those who are below 35 years old. So if you are becoming 35 years old, then you are no longer a member of children and youth constituency. So as a result of these constraints, members of children and youth constituency, or shortly younger, they often face difficulties building their capacity, expanding their networks, and pursuing their articulated commitments. And that undermines their material and leverage powers. However, despite these constraints, they have some advantages, and it is cognitive, social, and symbolic powers, because they draw upon cognitive and social powers to propose different policy suggestions. And while they're doing that, they usually emphasize their vulnerability and threatened future because they are the younger generation that will inherit the planet which is now under climate crisis. And they also try to utilize all the networks that they have to have solidarity claims with other constituencies, for example, to draw upon the expertise of indigenous peoples or farmers or women and gender constituency to come up with statements or proposals that would articulate their collective claims. And so my theoretical background was that young people, they lack material and leverage powers, but they have cognitive, social, and symbolic powers. What did I find out at the conference? So at the conference, I was an official youth representative, and I was an official member of this children and youth major group. And younger, despite truly lacking some material powers, they had a deliberately crafted strategy that they utilized to maximize their engagement. So every day there would be spokes council where young people would gather in the morning and discuss all the opportunities in which they could engage. And in the end of the day, there would be policy debriefs where young people would gather and discuss their negotiation outcomes and would build the strategy for the next day. Then their younger members, they also part of working groups within the structure of their constituency. And those working groups are, for example, in agriculture, in mitigation, in adaptation. And that's why they were able to spread to different sessions and follow the negotiation tracks. And it was really interesting to see that some member states were surprised to see young members present at the sessions because they didn't expect that. Because even some member states do not have enough negotiators to be present at all of the sessions. And then young people, they also utilized existing modes of engagements within the UNFCCC space. And it was organize their own side events on the topic of relevance to them, to young people, where they were able to showcase their expertise in the topic. And then craft and deliver some collective statements where they would invoke moral claims on their vulnerability, on generational approach, and the need to address climate change. And I think another really prominent thing that young people can do at these negotiations is to organize bilateral meetings with the representatives of member states, secretariat, and other constituencies. And at these bilateral meetings, they can exchange their opinions and they can elaborate on each other key demands and if not find common grounds, but at least understand what member states want to argue during the negotiations. And at this climate change conference, there were meetings with the representatives of US, Mexico, Europe, Germany, and also with presidency of COP27 that took place in Egypt. However, the interesting finding was about the leverage power, because there was a kind of power dynamic within younger members themselves, because some young members, they managed to obtain a party badge. And if you have a party badge, then you are a representative of member states. And it means that you have wider engagement opportunities and to be present in the meetings that are behind the closed doors. However, these young members, even though they were representatives of member states, they also associated themselves with the children and youth major constituency, and they shared their insights gathered from those close meetings with young members. And that's how young people could actually use it to their advantage. And as a youth member, I could be present at all of the events, observe how it is working, attend their plenary sessions, participate in drafting all those collective statements. And of course, there was a crucial part of experiencing the German culture and attending museums, concerts, and even visiting the famous castle in Bonn. So I'm really grateful for this experience, and I will use all these findings in my future research.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Iman Azganovic, and I have spent the past 6 months interning at the United Nations. And thanks to the David Matz Fellowship, I was able to spend some part of that internship in person at the headquarters in New York. Before I start the rest of the presentation, I want to say, I think working for the United Nations has been something that I have wanted to do since I was a child, basically. Obviously, after studying international relations and conflict resolution, I have become quite disillusioned with what global governance can and cannot do. But working there, especially while I was there in person at the headquarters, I think it was very inspiring seeing people who were not related to the political side of the United Nations, but who were genuinely trying to come up with the best policies and practices to help people on the ground. So I was working in the Department of Peace Operations, in the Policy and Best Practices section in their child protection team. So before I go into my own personal experiences, I thought I would give you just a bit of a context of what child protection in the United Nations peacekeeping setting entails. So the main actors on the ground are the child protection advisors who advise the mission leadership and work on mainstreaming the child protection practices in all aspects of the peacekeeping mission. And they monitor and report on the 6 grave violations against children, which I will get back to in a second. And they engage with all state and non-state actors in the conflict. They raise awareness and build capacity of the national counterparts on the issues of child protection, and also help them and support them in promoting legal reform that helps further protect children. So while I was at the UN, one of the big reports that came out that was related to the work that my team was doing was the report on children in armed conflict for the 2021, the report by the Secretary General. And it showcases how the child protection violations are, like grave violations against children, are still very prevalent. And the further kind of emphasizes the importance of having people on the ground that are strictly focused on the child needs and how they can be approached. So the team at the UN is working with the missions in Mali, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Sudan. And some of the highlights of the accomplishments for the past year, I've put down on the screen. And for example, in Central African Republic, the dialogue that the child protection actors have done has led to the release of 134 children. And they also helped with the government develop the inter-ministerial plans to implement the child protection code that was first set in 2020. In Mali, 2 factions of the coalition of armed groups known as the Platform have also signed action plans to end prevent recruitment and use of children. As you may have seen in the previous graph, the recruitment and use of child soldiers is still the most prominent grave violation in these 4 contexts. Similarly, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the 6 commanders also signed a unilateral commitment to end and prevent grave violations against children, which has simultaneously led to the release of 430 children associated with armed groups. And in South Sudan, they took steps to implement the 2020 Comprehensive Action Plan to end the violations there as well. So I was at the headquarters working with a child protection team that was served as backstopping capacity for all of these missions. And they are also responsible, since they're in the policy and best practices section, they were responsible for developing, supporting, and implementing like all of the policies and best practices related to child protection. And I was actually genuinely surprised by the amount of diverse work that I was exposed to and the opportunities that I was given while I was there. A lot of that work included monitoring the Security Council agenda, watching their meetings, and reporting back specific things related to the child protection, assisting in drafting notes and background papers, speeches, and other correspondence for the UN officials in this team. I was also worked a lot on the development of the strategic communication materials, including the webpage, reports, presentations, one-pagers, as well as the newsletter that came out like once every 4 months, regarding all the work that the missions were doing on the ground. And yeah, of course, like I said, supporting the backstopping of the child protection components that have the mandate of child protection, which was the MONUSCO, MONUSMA, UNMISS, and MONUSCO. But I think the most worthwhile experience for me was the workshop that the team has organized at the headquarters, which was the workshop of child protection advisors and focal points, where all the child protectors from the 4 missions came to New York, and we're discussing the challenges as well as the successes, and kind of exchanging stories and trying to learn from each other's experiences, and also help people in New York at the headquarters have a better understanding of what needed to be changed and what could be done more, what they can lobby for with the states, and what needed to kind of like be done on their end to help their work on the ground. It was, I think I gained exposure there into understanding the difficulties of not just of both people in New York who, despite like the best intentions, had very like tied hands at times on what they can and cannot do, and also people who were working on the ground and how they were simultaneously reporting to the mission and doing like the mandate that they were given, but also having this experience and relationships with people on the ground, and how all of that kind of like comes together. And I've learned so more than I can ever like kind of like put into words from all of those experiences. It definitely changed my perspective into how small things can actually have a worthwhile effect overall. And I don't think any of this would be possible if I wasn't there in person, and I wouldn't have been able to be there without this fellowship. So thank you so much for that. I think it will, not only have I gained more knowledge in these 6 months than I ever have before, but I have also learned from these people and how I can further like what I can do on my end to improve my experiences, my knowledge, to improve my chances of having a career in this field. And yeah, thank you.
Hi all. So yeah, my name is Meity Kubuan, and I'm gonna share my David Matz Fellowship story this summer. So I'm the last and the farthest, I think, from all. So I travel to Pamkilama village in Timika, Papua. It is located in the most eastern province of Indonesia. And this village was built by the American transnational mining company, Freeport-McMoran, and the government of Indonesia to house Papuans, the indigenous people of Papua, moving from their traditional land that has been used as a mining area. And why Kwamkilama? First and foremost, because I was born there 31 years ago. And then since I was kid up to now, I still see and I see my people there, the community there, they experience tribal war conflict. And then after graduated from the college, and then I was like wondering why the conflict keep happening. Like, what can I do for the people here? Even though I'm not the indigenous tribes that have right to live there, but my grandparents, they moved there because they got a job in that mining company. And then that's why they lived in the village for a while. So I was born there. And then I feel like I am part of that community and I need to do something for them. So yeah, in 2016, I finally decided to apply for the scholarship to study abroad to the US. And since after going out from that village and from that city, I found out that there is a program named Peace and Conflict Study. And I went through the Google and searched a lot of information about that program. And then there is only one university in Indonesia that offered that program. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough money to go to that university. And then I applied for a scholarship. And then I got a scholarship to study abroad. So I applied to UMass Boston and got accepted. That's why I came here. So on my application of that scholarship, we had to explain what we're gonna do with that degree. And then my main reason was only because of that village and the conflict there. And I think I'm gonna learn something new there and I'm gonna go back to my community and contribute to them. So then I finally came here. But I came here on 2020, but that was when COVID just hit us. And it was very hard for me to start, contacting people there because they don't have internet connection. Like, it's very hard to make it possible. I tried to collect some data from the internet, like news, but I felt that those data were not enough for me to finish my master thesis. Then, yeah, that's why I finally applied this before this summer to the David Matz Fellowship. And I feel like, I will dedicated the time that I have dedicated to the research that I've been working on. I will finally get what I really wanted from this program at the end. So then, yeah, as you can see in the picture, it is like I didn't include lots of picture here, but more or less this is like the situation there. Children, they don't go to school. People there, like their house has been, their houses have been impacted by the war itself. And I feel like what I learned the most there is how I can approach them, especially because it is a very sensitive topic. Before I got connected to the one of the tribal war there, but I feel that after explaining through WhatsApp about what I'm gonna do with them, he didn't want to reply my topic, our conversation, my last message, and then that made me thought that maybe like this is a very sensitive topic for him. Like he also has lost one of his son because of the war. Like their opponent killed his son, and then that's why I feel like when I came there and then I try to approach them in a different way, they feel like they are more heard, they are respected by the way I approach them, because this topic is very sensitive. And if I talk to them just by phone, over the phone, or over the Zoom call or something like that, even if that is possible, that they will feel that I don't really think that it is this is a very sensitive for them, and this is like really matters for them. That's why I feel like being able to, try different way to approach them, even in the field, is like something new that I learned. Because before here, my experience from class, my research method class, it wasn't that hard. Like we did research to our conflict resolution folks, and it's very easy. Just send them email and then explain to them, oh, we're gonna do this, and then they understand right away, because we're going to the same level of educational background. Like we understand what is research, what are you gonna do with this. Like we've been on the like same page about that. But with this community, I really start from the start where I need to explain with a very simple way what is research. Because the first day I came, and then I had my friend coming with me, and then he was like trying to observe what I'm doing. But after that, he said, Meity, I know maybe because you've been like in the different level of life with us, like the way you try to explain about your research to them, make them confused. Your language is too high for them. And I came back, and then I changed everything. And then the next day, I came back to the village, and then I tried to use very simple languages to explain to them what I'm gonna do with this. What is research, in a way that that can make them understand, but also at the same time, they should finally, feel like open and welcome to me. So I remember the first day when I came, and then I introduced myself as a US graduate student coming and trying to do this research, and they were like, no, what do you want from us? I got that word, and I was like, what is wrong, and what should I do? And then I came back, but then I tried to, revise. Oh, maybe the next day I will come using this way to explain to them. And then, thank God, finally, they started, understanding. And when they understand what I'm trying to do with them, when they understand my intention, they finally feel like more open and welcome to me. And also, like I said before, what made me surprised after going there and do the field study, when I introduced myself as a US graduate student, they feel reluctant and afraid to talk to me. And I remember there is a man saying, no, I don't know anything about that topic. I don't know anything about that conflict. But the next day when I came back, and then I introduced to like his neighbor, myself, and who my grandparents are, who my parents, and they said, wow, we know your parents, we know your grandparents, come here, you are our kids too, you are the children from this village. Like they say something like that. And I feel like, feel welcome. I feel like they really accept me there. And then also another thing that I found interesting is about the power dynamic that, affect the participant, especially the women, to participate on that. There were like 2 houses there where I came, and I asked the women to participate, but then after they have they talk like in front of me with their tribe language. I don't speak their tribal language, so I don't understand what they're talking about. But after talking, then the woman said, sorry, I cannot do that. Like something like that. And then the second house, it was the wife of the leader. And then I've been going there like for 2 times. And then she promised me that, okay, the next day when you come, I promised you that we will talk about it, because now I'm busy doing the house chore, and I don't think I have time for that. But the next day after coming, she said, listen, my husband is not here. I don't think it is a right thing to do with you to share everything about that, because I didn't involve in the war, and I feel like it's not my right to share about that story, even though I know exactly what happened there and I have something to say. But sorry, I cannot do that because my husband is not here. She said something like that. Yeah. So I feel like it's a great opportunity for me. First, because I finally meet like some leaders there, the community leaders too, and that helped me to, establish the link or connection with people there. And it contributed to my initial research that I think and I hope I will use for the future work after I complete this final project. I really hope that the result will become like my ground base to start my peace building work there in that community. So yeah, I would like to say thank you for choosing me as one of the David Matz Fellow this year. And yeah, I think I wouldn't be able to make it possible without this fellowship. Thank you so much.
So we have about 10 minutes left before we stop, so that the Tuesday evening classes can meet at 7. And I would just like to invite those of you who are here, including fellows, if you have questions for other fellows, and those of you who are joining us online, if anyone has any questions to ask, please do. And I think what we'll do is take a couple of questions, and then those of you who the questions are oriented to can come up to respond, so that our large number of participants on Zoom can also see you responding to those questions. So we'll start with a question from Katherine.
Yeah, my question is for Jillian. Of course. But I'm curious on if you see yourself in the future going back to helping this what was called EcoPaths. Yeah.
Sorry. So let's take a couple questions and then get a couple of answers, because I'm going to ask you to come back up here to respond. Okay. Yeah. So Katherine's question for Jillian is whether she sees herself going back to EcoPaths in the future. And there was also a hand raised in the back from actually David Matz himself, the person who this fellowship is named for. So those of you who are here who don't know him, I just give him a chance to ask a question and be a little embarrassed.
Several of you mentioned specifically, and others mentioned sort of implicitly, the notion that conflict moves from a generation to a generation. And I'd be interested to know really what you saw. That's a label. It moves. We sort of know that. But when you're there, what did you see? Even in the work you were doing in talking to people, what did you see that could tell you something about how it transfers? Does it transfer the same? Is it the same in generation A as B? Does it change? If it changes, how does it change? Where did you see anything by way of that? That may not apply evenly to everybody who spoke, but some of you specifically, I think I'd really be interested to know how that works.
So the question is about what those of you who spoke about, or maybe implicitly kind of noted intergenerational dimensions to conflict, what that looked like, or what your experience was in observing that. So let me just quickly check if anyone else has a question right now. Otherwise, I'll invite Jillian to respond to Katherine, and then those of you who can respond to David to respond to him as well. Oh, there's a question from Darren in the chat. For Hayley and Katherine, you saw a number of international symbols in Northern Ireland, like the Israeli star and the Palestinian flag. And what did you think of that? Or what do you think of that? All right, so come on up and please share. Sorry, it's a little awkward, I know.
So I'll just speak first to Catherine's question. And yes, I would, and I've talked kind of the director about that in different capacities. I think kind of in terms of the idea of sustainability, and I think Costa Rica is a place you see a lot of like outsiders coming in and making things happen, and they don't necessarily need to be the ones making things happen. So I think the aim of kind of making those opportunities for the locals who are like ready and willing to do it. Like one thing Sarah was like, you can deal with like the school groups and stuff because I don't want to deal with them. But so I think kind of finding that balance of like, I would love to be involved, but also like getting into a place where like I don't have to be involved because I don't see myself moving to Costa Rica in the long term. So yeah, that's what I would speak to that. And I feel like you talked about intergenerational.
I've just written 40 pages of this, so I'm ready.
Ready?
Good.
Ready.
So specifically for my paper, I actually focused on 3 generations. So I focused on the Troubles youth, the Good Friday youth, and then essentially the past 10 years to see how that conflict has shifted. And what I found, this is a spoiler alert for Darren, so stop listening. But what I found was that during the Troubles, like the reason how their narrative has been shaped and created was because they were actually part of the violence. They witnessed it. They had that sense of collective memory. The trauma impacted them to shape how they perceived the other side. And what I noticed for the Good Friday Agreement, so jump a couple decades, was that there was a sense that children were still getting that collective memory of what their parents and community had experienced with the violence and the conflict, but they also were ready to put that aside and move forward. But there was a hesitation due to the level of safety. So they did have more progressive thoughts of the other side, but like they weren't confident through like a lot of studies that talked about this. They weren't confident that conflict wouldn't flare up again. So it almost was just too soon for peace between both groups to kind of like merge, in my opinion. And then within the last 10 years, so many people, especially that I learned from a youth club that we met with in Northern Ireland, that they create their own narrative of the conflict because they didn't live through the violence and they didn't live through the witnessing of seeing a friend pass away or a family member get lost in a bombing. But they also have this level of respect for the older generation, which I thought was really interesting because I asked a really big question of like, do you try to change their mind? And they're like, it's not our place. Like, it's their trauma that they went through. I'm not trying to change them. So that was probably the most like powerful thing that I witnessed in terms of how conflict just keeps shifting, is like this younger generation, they're the change. Even though they live in a segregated world, it sometimes somehow works, but yeah. So, yeah. And Hayley, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, but or answer Darren's question.
Yeah, I think there's not so much I can add because, as Katherine has mentioned, she has written a really great paper. I've had the chance to read a lot of it, really great paper on it. But I think a lot of what I was able to just see in the little snapshot of time that we were there in terms of intergenerational is that there's kind of a contrast between I experienced it and I myself cannot let go of seeing this and what I was a part of. And there's children who this is what they've been taught and this is all they know and this is all the education system allows them to understand. But they've also had experiences that kind of don't align with what their parents are saying and what their parents are experiencing. So they're kind of dealing with their own internal conflict of how do I deal with having experiences that don't match what my parents are saying, that this whole group of people behaves this way and you can't trust this group of people and their experiences don't align with that. And so that youth group, it just was so incredible because it was like our last day there meeting the youth group. So after seeing individuals who are part of the IRA, individuals who, you know, lost family members, an individual who was shot within all of the violence, then going to the youth group and hearing, we understand, like Katherine stated, they specifically said, we don't want to change our parents' opinion. We do not understand what they experienced and we never will, but we don't want it to be this way forever. And if we always continue the narratives that they are passing down, it will always be that way. And so that was just an incredible way to wrap up everything that we had learned. And then in terms of Darren's question about some of the international symbols, I think it just really, really drove home the idea of how cross-cultural conflict is, and how conflict doesn't exist within a vacuum. I think all of us here are understand well that there are patterns to conflict. There are certain bases to conflict. That's why a lot of us are studying conflict resolution. There are things that are kind of across the board that we can understand. And I think it's also just interesting to see the way that individuals in such different contexts can see another conflict and see parts of themselves, parts of their struggles, parts of what life is like for them in a completely different context and connect with it. It was in some ways also used as a matter of furthering the segregation in Northern Ireland. And it was just, you're aligning yourselves with one cause, we are choosing the opposite side. It's not based in, I support what they support, I believe they deserve this. It's simply because you support them, I cannot. So I think in a lot of ways, it also just further illustrates the level of segregation that exists in the society. But in a lot of ways just shows what the use of a ConRes degree is, that there's so much that you can understand that doesn't have to be applied to only one context, that you're given the tools and the theories and the understandings, and you can apply it far beyond, you know, one country, one conflict, one context. So, yes.
And also really quickly, I just want to point out that we talked about a lot of like youth perspective of the conflict, but we did have an opportunity to meet with former, like all in one group, a former IRA, I believe it was a UVF, I think it was a UVF member and a British Army member. And it was essentially like a dialogue between them. And what was uncovered was like each party shared their story and their narrative of how like what they were fighting for, they don't want to happen to the younger generation, but there was a huge breakthrough with this dialogue that the former UVF member was listening to the former IRA female member, and she told a gut-wrenching story. Like you can't make it like it's a terrible story. And this individual looked at her and said, on behalf of like the UVF, we apologize. Like we had no idea that happened. So it was a very empowering moment of like, they went through the conflict, they fought for what they believed, but there's this form of, yeah, like, sorry, I was reading the comment. Hopefully, maybe one day. Very good.
So, yeah, I just want to respond to David Matz about the intergenerational conflict that happened in Kwamkilama village. From what I heard and what I saw there, that the most of the people there that decided to join the war, they do it because they feel that it is part of their culture first. And then, for instance, if it is not directly their family member that has been the victim of the war, they still feel like they keep looking back to the past where, you know, the member of other tribes there help them to do like the same war the same tribal war in the past, and then they feel like, oh, it is the time for us to pay back to them, to also help them in the war. And that's how the conflict keeps happening. And then also they pass it to the children through their narratives. And also normally the member of the opposing group, they don't talk to each other. So it's like very hard for them to really, heard about the other perspective or point of view in terms of seeing the conflict between them itself. So, but I did hear that religion plays like very important role in the shifting the conflict, because some people who finally decided to go to church or learn about the Christianity, they like mention something like, well, we know that it's not right because the Bible said this and that. So I feel like religion can be one of the tools that can be used for the peace building program in that community. So yeah, that's from me, I think. Thank you.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I don't think we have time for additional questions because several of you need to head off. But David, I see you have one more thing that you want to say or ask.
Just 30 seconds. I just want to thank you. This program got started when I retired. I had nothing to do with starting it, so it's not me. It's obviously for you and the students who come after. The money you got came from other students. This is alumni, right? You're about to be alumni. This is a pitch. Got it? You got the job? All right, fine. This was a magnificent presentation and the best demonstration I can possibly think of why this program exists. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone, to the fellows who presented, to Kelly and Jason for organizing the colloquium, to Kelly for all the work you've done in organizing the fellowship logistics and making sure that we have opportunities for our students to do the kinds of things that they all presented about tonight, and to everyone for joining us. David made his pitch to the David Matz Fellows, but anyone who wants to support this program is absolutely welcome to. And to everyone, as you wrap up the semester, good luck finishing up and have a happy holiday season. See you all in 2023. A good night.